I've been doing something very naughty recently, and I would suggest you guys do the same. Watch some videos from 2020. Read some articles from the pandemic. It's like looking into a universe of insanity and absolute madness. And the only reason that I know it actually happened is because I lived through it. Like, it's so difficult now to come to realization that there was this level of group hysteria and group insanity that was fueled pretty much by a massive online censorship apparatus where only one type of opinion was promoted and everything else was suppressed. I was saying during the pandemic that I'm really, really lucky that people have to stay indoors, because if I was to go out and actually live stream and actually show what people talk on the streets, like normal, average, day-to-day conversations would have gotten me banned from social media. I don't think I have ever seen such censorship in my life. I mean, probably hundreds of millions of dollars, I assume, were poured into making this censorship happen, which is most likely why it wasn't sustainable. But it was absolutely insane, right? And now that all of it is gone and we're looking back at it, you finally get to see articles that, again, like, if I was to say this during the pandemic, I would have gotten my channel banned. Or at least the video taken down for medical misinformation. But now it's safe, right? Now we can actually talk about the fact that, oh, look, Dr. Fauci could not recall evidence for child masking. And he also says that the 6-foot distancing came from nothing. And you also had like British scientists saying that, oh, if the measures don't happen, tens of millions will die. And like, none of those people were held accountable for the stuff they said. Like, I want you to understand, if a doctor gives a misdiagnosis to one patient, that doctor can be sued for malpractice. That doctor can lose his license depending on how bad the error is. But when you do decisions that influence hundreds of millions of people, it's not even a slap on the wrist. And I don't know why people are so shocked about this. As you can see, like, the article came yesterday. But we knew about this from the New York Post, and it's since January the 10th, when Dr. Fauci says that social distancing sort of just appeared, right? And I want to point out, like, the biggest reason for vaccine hesitancy in Eastern Europe wasn't misinformation. In fact, people generally, like, didn't even give a shit what everyone was talking on the TV. The only thing people knew is, like, wow, the censorship is pretty fucking insane. Like, if they're censoring it, it means that I need to do the opposite, right? Because, like, people here in Eastern Europe, we benefited from communism. We benefited from the Iron Curtain. And when I say benefited, I mean the moment you see that the government is trying to suppress something, the opposite is the thing, right? Because if reality is 2 + 2 = 4, there's no need for censorship. There's no need for that, right? But when Chernobyl exploded and the government wants you to believe that it didn't, then there is need for censorship. So, according to the article, the former director of National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease admitted there was no evidence to support that the distancing to limit the spread of COVID, and failed to recall evidence for child masking. He testified behind closed doors over 2 days in January to the House and Selective Subcommittee. Like, I already showed that this is old information. And they released the transcripts of his testimony ahead of his public testimony scheduled to take place next week. You know, I don't recall it just sort of happened. I don't recall like a discussion of whether it should have been 5 feet or 6 feet or whatever he testified. Do you see any studies that support 6 feet? He's like, I was not aware of studies that, in fact, that would be very difficult to do. This was my argument during the pandemic, but again, I couldn't have said it on YouTube, because if I would have said it, channel immediately shut down. Like, they have AI, they managed to trace for this. And I was like, well, how the fuck do they even make these experiments? Like, why is it 6 feet and not 5 feet? Like, I would have wanted to ask these questions. Well, I guess someone else asked my questions to Fauci, and now you know. Upon further questioning, he said that 6 feet was an empiric decision that wasn't based on data or even data that could be accomplished. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's fine. But why were they censoring people then? No, I understand, all right? But it was like the science. Do you remember that? It's like, trust the science, and Fauci came out and he said, if you contradict me, you contradict the science because I am the avatar and you just have to deal with it. It's like, what? The 6-book directive was given by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and supported by Fauci, the face of the government's response for the pandemic. During the second day of his testimony, he made a similar concession about the lack of scientific evidence supporting masking children. Like, I remember, like, the whole problem with the parents and, oh my god, like, there were, all these videos coming up with kids crying and they were forcing them to get masked up and shit. And it's like, again, watch those videos. Like, it's difficult to believe that genuinely happened, but it did. Do you recall reviewing any studies or data supporting the masking for children? You know, I might have, he says, but I don't recall specifically that I did, Fauci replied. Nonetheless, Fauci defended initial school closures, but ceded responsibility from them to other decision makers. On the question of learning loss, he suggested the debate on the impacts of child masking is still unsettled. An abundance of research since the beginning of the pandemic indicates the combination of school closures and child mask mandates. What I really love the most about talking with your neighbors that were, you know, pro-government during that time, it was that you would say something, right? Like, for instance, you would say that, well, the 6-foot thing is kind of ridiculous. Like, just... and they would be like, no, you're wrong. Oh, you want to kill grandma. And then a couple of weeks later, like, let's say it would be announced on television. It's like, oh, we got new data now. Like, all of that is nonsense. And you'd go to your neighbor and you'd be like, what? And your neighbor was like, yes, but you don't understand the science. It's dynamic. It's constantly evolving. It's always in flux. We know now more than we used to know yesterday. And it's like, dude, you're not even a fucking scientist. Shut the fuck up. You're just watching the television. And if the guy on the television, that's not even a scientist, it's a fucking journalist, right, is telling you that not even a scientist, a politician told you to jump, and you're asking him how high. And if tomorrow it says you shouldn't jump, then you don't jump, and it's like, and then you're arguing with me over that. And that what was pissing me off. But yeah, it is what it is, I guess. The thing that really scares me is that if there was another event tomorrow where the exact same measures were applied, you would probably get the exact same results. Like people most likely haven't learned their lessons. They haven't learned anything about it. Even when you can see with the Twitter files just how many government agencies were involved in the censorship, they would probably still say, oh, well, it's my private company, can do whatever it wants. I don't even know what to say, man. Except, just watch some videos from 2020. I guarantee to you, it's so bizarre. And the thing is, like, you need to understand, this wasn't just the government. It was your neighbor. It was members of our family. Because if everyone would have given the middle finger and said, you know what, I'm going to talk online just what I talk on the street, they couldn't have banned everyone. But people complied, and people apparently, like, they trust the institutions more than they trust anyone else. Let me know what you guys think, though, and as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.